You want to just get to rocking and rolling?
We can rock and roll.
All right. We are going to rock and roll with our fireside chat with the National Cybersecurity Director, my ex-colleague, my friend. I like to say a real one. You don't get to sit in the keynote seat of the HBCU IP Tech Law Summit if you're not somebody that I know is more than willing to pay it forward. The wonderful Kemba Walden. Kemba, I've been telling them the first lesson that you need to know in being an IP or even a transactional lawyer is you have to be okay with uncertainty. And you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And then I told them about all the audibles that I had to deal with yesterday in preparing for this conference. So tell them what you've been up to, and then we're going to talk about who you are and what it is that you do, because it's a lot that we.
It's a lot.
Yes.
First of all, Charlie, it's so good to see you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me here.
Mhm.
Thank you for hosting this important tech law summit. It's important to cybersecurity. It's important to innovation. It's important that you have these conversations. So thank you for having me. So Charlie asked me to explain why I've been probably causing some uncertainty in his program. I was supposed to be here earlier today, and I couldn't tell him why until 5 o'clock this morning. I didn't call him then. But our national cybersecurity strategy was launched. I had to launch it, and it was conflict with Charlie's timing for me. So the president approved it Friday afternoon. My office overlooks the White House, the West Wing, and his South Lawn. So I was watching him fly off, turned around, looked at my computer, got a message. The president has approved your strategy. So then things started to move and click along. Mm-hmm. We had to launch it today at the time that Charlie intended for me to do this. So I've been launching the strategy. Over 3,000 people were watching a live streamed, standing room only sort of activity. It's been getting good press. Good. Talked to the press yesterday, talked to the cybersecurity community today. My staff, God bless them, wanted to give me a break and said, ma'am, you don't have to. I said, no, I have to. It's important. You're important. Everybody watching this is important. You're the future. Those that we're talking to are the future of what makes this country great, what makes our country secure. It is important. So I wanted to be here. I needed to be here. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
That's why she's here. And we haven't even scratched the surface. Can you tell them a little bit about your educational background? Because it's full of diversity, and I just love Kemba. And then we'll go from there. These aren't Roosevelt, sorry. There goes the questions. We're going to have a conversation.
Yes, thank you. It's nice to do that.
Yes.
So I went to Hampton University, my home by the sea, a long time ago. But I went to Hampton University. I was a political science major. I transferred in from Johns Hopkins, where I was a biomedical engineering major. I wasn't getting the experience that my parents told me I was going to get when I went to college. They are both Fiskites. And so I came home after the first year of my freshman year at Johns Hopkins and told my parents that I'm not going back to school. I'm going to take a year off. I don't know what. They thought that was cute. They drove me down to Hampton. So I'm a proud graduate of Hampton University. Right after leaving Hampton, I went to Princeton to do, at the school now we call SPIA, to do a master's in public administration. I was focused on international development. Was offered to go to Bosnia-Herzegovina in the mid-90s. I don't know if you remember that back then. My grandmother at the time was going to have a heart attack. My family offered me a car, whatever. Do not do this. So I ended up going to Tbilisi, Georgia, which wasn't in the news as much, but it was a lawless kind of society in the mid-90s. Went to Tbilisi, was the only Black person in that country and all the neighboring countries doing development work. That gave me a perspective that I didn't realize was going to be so profound. So my first layer was Hampton University. understanding who I am in the context of my community. Then it was leaving my community, going across the seas to Tbilisi to do development work, and understanding my role in development in a real way. So from Princeton to Tbilisi, I was doing good work, I think. I was doing conflict resolution work, microfinance work, trying to develop communities in a society that was not secure. Realizing that there was macroeconomic concerns, macroeconomic issues that really impacted how development was taking place at the community level. So I wanted to up my game. I wanted to get a PhD in economics or a law degree. I decided to take what I thought. I don't know if I think that anymore. What I thought was the easier route, and I went to Georgetown Law School, got my law degree. Turns out I'm a pretty good lawyer. I ended up clerking on the Fifth Circuit, doing appellate litigation at a white shoe law firm, doing arbitration and tax, and all really good, profitable stuff, but I didn't feel like I was really meeting my roots. So I ended up going to the Department of Commerce as a trade remedies lawyer. They wanted people that could do great brief writing, and they would teach the technical stuff. So I did that, trade remedies. I hated the technical stuff, frankly, and pivoted to export controls, which is more security focused. Again, technology focused, but security focused. And I really thrived in that space, still not really drawing a connection between my original intent, but moving in that security space. I then went from a law firm, because I just couldn't justify accounting for my time in 6-minute increments at the time. It's hard. I went to Department of Commerce. Not Department. I went to Department of Homeland Security. I was one of those strange people that got a job applying on USA Jobs. And when I got there, my role was to be the DHS representative, what at the time was called Team Telecom. And that was to look at national security concerns associated with foreign investment in certain FCC licenses, including submarine cable landing licenses and et cetera. So I was a DHS representative feeding information to the FCC and coming up with contractual language, conditions on FCC licenses to mitigate whatever public safety or national security threat that we identified. From there, I just grew. I was a lawyer, the primary lawyer for what's known as CFIUS for the Department of Homeland Security. So it broadened out from just telecommunications infrastructure to sensitive technologies at large, foreign investment in US business that had some sort of critical technology, sensitive critical infrastructure business, and then mitigated those national security concerns on behalf of the department and the larger interagency community. The most interesting cases were those that implicated cybersecurity. So before CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, became CISA, I went over to the heartbeat of cybersecurity for the Department of Homeland Security to just do cyber all day, every day as a lawyer. So I did that, focusing on the financial services sector, which made sense because of my CFIUS background, energy, because that was also complex. So you can handle complex stuff. This was in the 2015 era. So I'd been at DHS for about 6 or 7 years at this point. So in the 2015 era, I just had my second son, I remember. They said, look, you're doing so much. We're just going to give you this little collateral thing on elections security. So I became the primary lawyer on network security for elections infrastructure in 2015. So remember what happened in 2015 into 2016. That became my life. Government shut down for 5 weeks. I wasn't doing anything else. Microsoft literally, well, no, they didn't call me. They sent me a note on LinkedIn. Turns out they own LinkedIn. They sent me a note on LinkedIn and said, we have a job for you if you want it. I said, this is lovely. This is scraping. Somebody is trolling me. Thank you very much. They wrote back on LinkedIn and said, no, this specific individual who I know wants to bring you in to do this specific work. I looked at it, and it was to be the lawyer for what Microsoft at the time called Defending Democracy. Perfect job, location Redmond. I said, thank you, this is perfect. Tell the person that wants to hire me, this is absolutely the right job. I am never moving, but thank you. I'll just wait for the government to open back up. They said, no problem. So here I am. So I was at Microsoft, met Charlie and all of my other great colleagues. That's how I ended up being the lawyer on defending democracy. 2020 came, the elections were deemed secure. The senior vice president over the computer security and trust, I can't remember what the acronym was, called me up on the eve of the election, or on the right after the election. I remember the night after the election. It said, now we want you to start up a counter ransomware program in our digital crimes unit. I don't know how ransomware works at the time, but I did it. So I was at the startup phase at CISA, the startup phase for the counter ransomware program at Microsoft. And then here I am, the White House called several times and finally convinced me. And I know this sounds like I'm being egotistical, but the roots are at Hampton. I want to explain that. The White House called me and said, no, we want you to be second in command for our startup, the Office of the National Cyber Director. And then the first in command retired while I was in Munich earlier in February. And here I am. And here I am. But thank you for giving me the time to explain all of that. It's a long story.
No, it was beautiful because I see the heads nodding. They've heard about CFIUS today.
Yeah.
They've heard about the cables in the FCC. We had someone from the FCC here that is on the cybersecurity side, and what is he? Chief Enforcement Bureau. So he was here, and I told him, I was like, well, now we got the National Cybersecurity Director coming. You just gotta come back because she's launching her strategy. So a lot of what you said resonated. The acronyms that you were dropping, if they took notes earlier, they should know who you're talking about. This national cybersecurity strategy that kept you away, can you tell us a little bit about it, how it came about, and how you and your team are impacted by it, how you led it, and then also how it impacts all of us? What we can.
Yeah, of course. So you just sit down and think about it for a minute, right? Cybersecurity risk is born by us in the room, right? You're responsible for not clicking on a nefarious link. You don't know which. Sometimes you don't know which link is nefarious. My mom does online banking. So cybersecurity risk is born by those of us that are not necessarily the best equipped to resist it. The premise of the cybersecurity strategy is that all Americans should benefit from cyberspace. We need to thrive and prosper online, small communities, small and medium businesses, individuals. But we should not, as individuals, have the same responsibility for securing all of us, the whole digital ecosystem. That's just not fair, right? It's not effective. So the idea behind the cybersecurity strategy at its core is to lift that risk off of those that cannot bear it, shift it to those that can, and buy it down. Risk, then, you can't get to zero. You need to make it defensible. So we get the risk down to some residual level of risk. Then we have to build up. Then we have to build resilience. And when I talk about resilience, I mean not just in our technology, but in our people who are in cyberspace, right? So cybersecurity in our educational system, those that implicate cyber, those that are on the assembly, those that are out in rural areas building out broadband right now. Cybersecurity people are in it. So we have to build resilience at that people level, but even more important than that, we have to build resilience and close vulnerabilities and the roles and responsibilities. Who's accountable for what? I should be more accountable than any individual for cybersecurity so that my mom can bank and not give me a heart attack when she does it, right? That's the core premise. Now, it's 30 pages, 35 pages, it has 5 pillars. We talk about disruption, we talk about moving forward, we talk about shifting liability. That you'll like that one, shifting liability. We talk about what we need to do with regulation. We talk about insurance backstop. We talk about all of this in an international context, all these pillars, but at its core is to lift cybersecurity risk off of individuals, small communities, small businesses, and shift it to where it belongs. That's what's happening at its core.
Oh, we love that
Yeah.
because we're all about risk allocation, as you said.
Yeah.
And today, during the panels, they heard about how GDPR has kind of set the standard and how it seems like the European Union took a more humane approach,
Yeah.
protecting their citizens and not putting the risk there and kind of allocating it. And it sounds like to some extent that's what you've done with your plan. And we have time today. So if you want to elaborate on any one point that you think really applies to us or that we would be able to understand, feel free. If not, I will return to
To Roosevelt.
Roosevelt's
They're good questions, though.
questions.
Roosevelt.
They're questions. You let me know.
I know. I prefer conversation. So look, just to address the GDPR issue, I was in Germany at the Munich Security Conference recently. This is the first time that we had a White House presence at Munich Security that was cyber specific, cyber focused, right? I was there with Secretary Blinken for State Department. I was there with Secretary Mayorkas with Homeland Security. I was there with the Vice President, and it was me on cyber. There was a demand for the conversation on cybersecurity and how that impacts our national security. I was talking to the German cyber ambassador. She said, she delivered remarks, and she said, the first time Kemba came to Germany, she talked about this notion called professional intimacy, talking about how government and private sector, those that own and control infrastructure, have to work together to get this right? It's a global commons, it's a public good. So the federal government has a responsibility, but it's ultimately a public good owned by a lot of the private sector. So there has to be some intimacy. We have to be able to identify problems and solve them together in real time. That was a new concept for Europe. Europeans, though, took a forward-leaning jump on GDPR.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned was that we can't just let market forces function. Like it's only gotten us so far. We have to lean in. I have a duty to protect the American people. And so I did the very hard job of reflecting what the administration is now saying, right? We are going to regulate. We're going to do it smartly. We're going to harmonize our regulations, and we're going to do it in consultation with private sector, but we are going to regulate. We are going to cross baseline cybersecurity requirements. We're going to shift responsibility. We're going to shift liability to those that have to be responsible for the software and our critical technology, right? We have to work with Congress to do it. We have to work with stakeholders, civil society. It's a multi-year project, but I sat up there on the stage and said it. We have to do it, right? We can't just stand by and let enlightenment when the private sector take hold. I think even Brad's book, I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about Microsoft specifically because I was there, but Brad's book, in the very first pages, he says that we need to be regulated. Cloud service providers need to be regulated. That's right.
Yeah.
And I need to do it, right? So that's what the other piece I wanted, so that's the European piece. The other piece I want to lean into is it's not trite for me that people are inside, like that. The people are at the center of this. If I get nothing else across, it's that the internet really reflects humanity, not the other way around, right? The internet reflects humanity. People are in it. I can't say that enough. And so I think of ONCD as a symphony. I used to play the piano for a long time. You might understand this as a music example, but with their movements in a symphony. First movement at this startup was to start the office, to walk in the door of the White House, find some office space. That's hard. Hire all the right talent, deliver a strategy. We're strategic in nature, right? But then there's some more movements to this before my tenure is done, and my perspective, right? There's some nuts and bolts. We've got to identify roles and responsibilities across the enterprise, federal enterprise, on who's doing what in cyber. We have to have our own internal NCD strategy. Sort of how are we thinking about things over the next couple of years? But the two biggest pieces are a workforce awareness and education strategy. We had a summit in July of last year. We're moving head on into how do we fill those jobs that have cyber and IT in them so that we maximize our talent, our diversity, right? How do we do that? What are the levers that we need to push? Right. So that's why I'm here talking to you specifically. You are just as important, if not more important, than the 3,000 community that I was talking to earlier today. It's the people. How do we implicate the cyber and how do we do that? What do we do to fill those jobs that implicate cyber? The policymakers, the lawyers, the assembly workers. How do we raise their awareness? And then what do we do with that pipeline, that K through 12? My kids are going to need a driver's license to drive a car. They have Amazon Fires and iPads and all sorts of things now, and they don't have a license. My daughter, however, did take a cybersecurity class before she's 10, so she's probably the most prepared 10-year-old in her school. But wouldn't that be? What do we do there? How do we make sure that they become cyber aware, that they have the proper education so that they can fill those jobs in the future?
Love it.
Yeah.
Roosevelt, eat that. She got the point across. We had a conversation earlier today, and it resonated with me because you're talking about jobs and the pipeline. We got little kids that know how to use credit cards to buy Roblox and Fortnite V-Bucks and things of those matters. And filling this pipeline, where do you see this strategy eventually leading to jobs that
we're already implementing? So we have, we're a strategic organization. We have to be thoughtful about it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also building the plan mode. We're applying it, right? We got to. It's a national security problem to have so many unfilled jobs, but it's also one of economic opportunity.
Can you explain? Because we didn't come across, but I know you and I talk the same language. Explain to them what you mean by building the plane while flying. Because some of us in here get it, but I want to make sure those who may not understand that lingo, what you mean. Not exactly, but let them give them something so they understand.
So these are today problems. So we need to address them today. But we also need to make sure that we have durable solutions for the future. I need to do that simultaneously because I'm not Pollyanna. We have a problem today. I need to do something about it today. So we're implementing already. So for example, those good paying jobs. We have the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We have CHIPS and Science Act, Inflation Reduction Act. So let me start with Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We are building broadband out there.
I'm telling them to listen.
We are building broadband out there into communities. All cybersecurity attacks happen in somebody's community somewhere. You want to make sure that we build it with security baked in. Somebody's got to do that, right? So we are investing in states' ability and there's money in the statute for this. States to be able to have cybersecurity planning. And I go out there and proselytize on a regular basis. Go get that money. And if you can't get that money, you can get free technical assistance from CISA to build that cyber plan as you're building broadband. And then you've got to talk to state secretary of education at the state level. That's a complicated job. But then we have to train people to take those jobs. You have to reskill, upskill. You have to train veterans that are coming back. Do we really need expensive certifications for you to get this job? Think about that. Do you really need that, or do you need a certain set of skills? We're building broadband today. Let's make sure it's secure, right? So I'm building the plane as I'm flying it. The the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of money for EV, to develop the EV market and EV batteries, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see a national security opportunity there. I see an economic opportunity there, right? We don't want cars. We want a clean energy environment. We want cars that are responsible and built well. What we don't want is a car to be a vector for a cybersecurity attack. We don't want a car to plug into an outlet of some sort and shut the electric grid off, right? I'm also concerned about a car blowing up, but I mean, imagine. So one of the things we've used our convening power in the White House to cause CEOs, it's that responsibility level of that cyberspace I described, CEOs to come in and talk to us about what their threats are in a classified space, what the vulnerabilities are. And we had somebody understand in that space, oh my God, this is a business cost that I cannot afford. I have to make a capital investment to improve my security. It's not the IT guy, right? So we need to do that now. There's a lot of money out for good reason in the Inflation Reduction Act, particularly for for vehicles and accessories. We need to make C-suite understand what investments they need to make sure that they are there's a security is a differentiator, right? So we're not trying to get first to market, we're trying to get secure to market at that time. And same thing with Chips and Science Act. There are some provisions built in for building up the workforce, for developing the right skills along cybersecurity. We just have to lean in and do the work now as we're thinking strategically.
Sounds like
Yeah.
a lot of
It's a
work.
lot of work,
I told you, you all, a lot of change,
a lot of change.
a lot of evolving. And if I'm one of the lawyers in the room, I'm listening very closely to these acts because what you can do is find a niche in counseling these corporations on, all right, here's the funds here, here's how you can go after them, or the government, or different clients on, hey, here's money here. I would try to go there because this is where it's going. So I love it. I
Mhm.
love that they have you there. This is what we talked about. We need the right people in the room that are talking about it. And this building a plane while flying,
Yeah.
we so can relate. Are you the support that you need to kind of, when you're building a plane while flying, sometimes people may not understand.
Mm.
And you mentioned the EV market and how you're bringing it in. It makes me think of, I have a mentee who had his car stolen recently.
Yeah.
Um, Apparently on TikTok, there's I think a Hyundai and a Elantra. There's this trend of how to steal a car, and you apply that to what could happen. As you said, you don't want an EV car to be a vector in
Yeah.
the system. Are the CEOs kind of supporting you, and
Yes.
what are you seeing? And if not, how do you persuade them? Because some people are all about
Yeah. Well, we have to. It's a market differentiator. That's what I'm saying. This is an economic opportunity. It's not just national security. It is. There's a. This is an example that might resonate. I own a Volvo right now. I don't know why I own a Volvo. I used to drive a little bit red stick shift, right? But I got pregnant, and somehow in my mind I decided I needed
safety.
safety, right? Right. There was a point in time, I think, when I was a child, and I must have sort of internalized this. They were crashing their Volvo into walls and showing people that was their market differentiator. Right? You remember that? Right. So, because in my mind, as soon as I got pregnant, I got to get rid of the little red stick shift and go get a Volvo. That's where we need to lean in with security by design, and it needs to be a market differentiator. So when I talk about things like regulations to CEOs, they don't want to hear that, right? They just hear, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to hire a bucket more of compliance lawyers to execute these regulations. I don't know what these are. I talk to them. I talk to them in real talk. And what we've come together to conclude is that right now we have companies that invest in cybersecurity and they invest wisely in cybersecurity, but they're not first to market because of it. And we have companies that are less vigilant about security, but they could be first to market. How about we cause some baseline requirements to even the playing field so that we incentivize a secure to market, right? That makes sense. It's creating the level playing field. And while we're doing it, we hear you, industry. Some of you have 150 million regulations you're trying to comply to, which is not helpful. It's becoming costly to have a regime of compliance, but that doesn't get us better security all the time. So it's incumbent upon me, while I'm raising the baseline using the authorities that we have to use, to also reduce the burden of over regulation and to harmonize the playing field so that we get to a place where it is secure to market, not first to market. That's the idea. That's so CEOs will have that conversation. And I think it's the right one.
I think you knocked most of them out of Roosevelt's questions.
Good.
Now we can have some real talk. How do you define success?
Oh, so for my office and for me personally. So
Yes.
for my office, and I know I'm gonna sound corny, but I genuinely mean this. If I can improve the lives of American citizens, I call that success. It's a journey. It might be incremental,
That's not corny.
but I just, that is, at the end of the day, that's who I serve.
That's purpose.
That's purpose.
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
not corny.
That's written into our nascent internal strategy, improving the lives of American citizens, making sure that we clarify roles and responsibilities, and making sure that we are always collaborative, teamwork. So that's what defines success for me in my office. For me personally, every job I get, I feel successful if I'm constantly adding value. Feel like I'm adding value. I'm learning something, right? Adding value and learning something. That defines success for me personally in the workplace. Right? I'm also a mom. Success is having my kids do things on their own and still loving me for it. But adding value. So it took me a while to understand that I have a unique perspective. There's only one Kemba Eneas Walden,
Yes.
and I have something to give, right? I have a perspective that's built from all of those years of experiences, however divergent they may seem. Like I didn't say no to anything. Team telecoms, all these things that you heard got me to where I am today. Now, my predecessor is a brigadier general. He has 3 PhDs in engineering. He's a perfectly smart, lovely, older, taller white guy. We couldn't be more different in how we approach a problem, but we get to the same place. And when we get there, the solution is like profound, right? So I have, in my own unique way, value to add, and I have a staff like that. I have 80 members of Ion is here as one of my staff members. They come at problems from different perspectives. So I lean into the diversity of who's around me. I don't want yes people. I have a guy on my staff I disagree with half the time. He is my spinach, and I always have him with me. Right? He writes my speeches. We fight, right? But we laugh. It's Nick, but he's my vegetables. You don't want to eat your vegetables all the time, but right? So adding value is key for me. And then what do I draw from it? How do I grow? How do I cause other people around me to grow? If I'm not doing those 2 things, then it's time for me to find a new opportunity. That's how I define success.
Y'all see why me and Kimba resonate with each other a lot. What would you tell this group? Some of them law students, some of them legal professionals. What would you want to leave them with here today? Because of course, I was told that they can't take questions, and I understand you're the National Cybersecurity Director, and people would love to find anything that you say to exploit.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're national cybersecurity. So with that said, what would you want to leave them with? Parting words of wisdom, because you've said a lot and you've shared a lot with us. We're very grateful for you. Go get those jobs. Where's our cameras?
You don't have to be the last time I coded was in 6th grade. Right? That was a long time ago. I know I look young, but that was a long. I think my first computer was an Apple IIe, like that, right? You don't have to be a technologist. We need people. There are things that you can teach. There are things that you cannot. It's those unteachable skills. It's that critical thinking. It's that curiosity. I can't make people be curious, but I need people to be curious at bottom. I have our chief of staff has no cybersecurity background. He does now, but no, he was a trial lawyer for a very successful trial lawyer for a very long time. He understands the White House well. He's been in the inner workings. He understands it well. I'm reading my speech, giving this speech to a cybersecurity community, the cybersecurity audience that I knew I was giving it to. I'm reading it. And he says, Kemba, you know what? So this is good, but this doesn't make sense. And what if you phrased it this way so that humans can understand, right? I needed that man in my orbit, right? In order, because he's like, this is what you really mean. This is what we're delivering. This is how we need to capture the imagination. We need to make sure we don't stifle innovation. That's what he said. right? He's a trial lawyer. He knows how to talk to people. I didn't know I needed a trial lawyer in my cybersecurity office, right? So all that's to say is be curious. Go out and if somebody asks you to do something, say yes, right? If it's CFIUS, absolutely. You hate looking at balance sheets, okay, but you're gonna learn it, right? Be curious. That's it. Don't say no. Say yes more often than you say no. Be intentional. I think that's it.
Intentional part. What's the best career advice you've been given? And then the next question is I want to make sure I check his boxes. And then what's the worst career advice you?
Oh, let's start with the worst. The worst career, which I thought was good advice. Um, and I don't even know where this person is now, so he may or may not ever see this. But he told me in my first nonprofit job, I was when I was in Washington after I left Tbilisi, I was the financial manager running programs for Sub-Saharan Africa for this nonprofit, and I felt overwhelmed. And he said, "You know, you're just a dime a dozen. You just just understand that you're not indispensable." I think he was trying to calm me down. Like, it's okay because something goes wrong.
That's terrible advice.
So, right?
Wow.
That was terrible advice because I've come to learn that my perspective is my perspective. I'm unique. I have something to deliver and to add. It is not like anybody else's. Um, the best advice I can give is that your blessings are your blessings. Your blessings are your blessings. They're not necessarily the same. This is a collaborative space. You can't do everything alone. So work together. Work with those that you disagree with on a regular basis. It's okay. You need to be at the table. If they need to reshape the table for you, they need to reshape the table for you. But you need to be at the table. Don't doubt yourself. I have this imposter syndrome. It's it's sometimes it's loud.
Asked about that.
Yeah, sometimes it's loud.
Mhm.
But I've worked on quieting those voices and amplifying the positive voices.
You've done I work with Kemba,
Yeah,
and one of
he
the
knows.
things
He knows
that
some
I
of the.
always used to tell her is, you just look at Kemba's resume, Hampton, Princeton,
Huh.
and I'm like, there's nobody like you. Your voice is different. You got us, and then you went and learned the other side. That's not something you see that's common. And when we would talk as colleagues, I was always impressed and like, but it sounds like it's come through because you've said it several times. There's nobody like me.
There's nobody like
Sometimes
me.
we have issues
There's nobody
saying
like
I'm
you,
unique.
Charlie.
I know, right? Like
Huh.
sometimes we have issues
It's
owning
okay.
our uniqueness,
Yeah.
and to hear it from the National Cybersecurity Director,
Yeah.
it's more impactful. I'm nobody, but you saying
Oh,
own your
Charlie.
stuff.
You are somebody.
My voice is different. I'm loving it.
And it deserves to be at the table making those
Yes.
decisions. It really does. All of your voices do. My whole so I get to reflect the good work of my team. I might have my own unique way of projecting their good work, but it belongs there. It really does.
That's a great leader. You see how this is y'all. They get. I love it. I think we knocked all of his out. The best, the worst career advice. You kind of touched on this, but what would you say is the biggest?
Being the national cybersecurity director. So I had a year. I think it was 2020. Lots of bad things were happening in 2019, moving into 2020. 2019, I didn't say no to a thing. I didn't say no to anything. That was a risk. It was a risk. But Shonda Rhimes, I think, said she had a do you know Shonda Rhimes?
Oh, you know,
Yeah, okay. Okay. I think she said somewhere she just decided not to say no for a while. I was like, try that. So I just didn't say no to anything. And then coupled with all that was all the crazy in 2020, COVID and people close to me dying, and we didn't know what was going on, being a mom of small children. George Floyd was murdered. I got angry And somebody called me and said, I need your help writing this, out of the blue from New York. I need your help writing this policy paper I'm working on. Yes, okay. Turns out that was on a Biden policy committee, writing a policy paper on cyber. I got a call from that side of the policy committee, so the international and the domestic side. So I was leaning in. I channeled my unsettledness into that space because I needed for something to change, and that was something I could contribute to change. That was a risk. I did not know that at the time that that's how people go get political appointments. I had no idea. I just knew that I needed to contribute to a change. I was, because of too many close family members that had passed away, I was too scared to go out into the streets to protest. I wanted to be there, small kids, but I found a way to channel my unsettledness, and it was a risk to say yes to everything. I'm so glad I did because I provided that perspective. I didn't know who else was. It was all virtual. It wasn't clear to me who else was on my cyber policy committee. You look across the United States government, they're all the leaders of the United States, and the White House started calling, and they kept calling. They get Treasury, Commerce, DHS. I said, no, look, I was like, stop calling. I got a good job. I'm trying to stand up this ransomware thing. I'm trying to go get bad guys. Cut it out. And so I finally got a call, and they were like, look, I was sent as an envoy to figure out what will it take to get you into the administration. I was like, I'm done with my year of yes. I've been tired. So I just flippantly said, look, if you put me in the White House to do cybersecurity, I'll come. But leave me alone. So they called the day after Russia invaded Ukraine and asked me to be the second in command for this office that I'm now leading. That was a big risk, but I'm leaning into it. I've got some good support, got some good partners. Yeah.
Wow. She got a lot more risk than that. That's the one that she's going to share with you. And it's good that this is going to be recorded because you all have had a chance to experience the Kemba. Kemba is this your third year?
What?
Of coming to the tech.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. This is my third
first
year.
Experience. I did. I told her I need you to come. You're gonna love it. You got the HBCU. We have this thing with Hampton and Howard. We go back.
And he's got Royal Blue. I'm a Zeta. 30 years.
Right.
I normally show up with Royal Blue.
Yes. I got your favorite color, but the first experience wasn't all that great. And
I remember that.
You necessarily didn't say that. I knew it. I told her we were going through some changes. It wasn't the HBCU love and way that things should have went down on her first one. And second time she came back, she enjoyed it. Was on a great panel.
I think I talked about blockchain and security.
Tiffany Smith. Yes, Tiffany was here. She's
amazing.
She
partner. A year or two ago.
She's great. She flew in just to do this for us. This is the type of love and camaraderie we build here. And you did a great job, but I'm like, they just don't know Kemba because Kemba is humble. Before she was very humble. If I was Kemba, I'd be talking some stuff. But you're growing because you're saying how there's nobody like me. And I'm like, well, I need you still to come back again. And
in fact, I think I saw you sort of do a sneak peek for the Tech Law Summit. And I know stakeholder engagement's going to be mad, so don't tell Roosevelt I did this. But I reached out to you and said, I'm coming. Let me know when, what, we're going to make this happen. This is an important summit, and made it happen.
It's not that many people who walk the walk and talk the talk. And Kemba is one of those. I'm so glad that you're here and this has been recorded, and we finally got a chance to highlight you, my friend, a real one. I don't say that about a lot of people. A chance to highlight you the way that you deserve. And I had these plans before she became the National Cybersecurity Director. I knew she was this dope, and you and I were exchanging on LinkedIn, and I'm like, well, we got to get you in an even better light. And you kind of faithfully told me, hold on, some things in the works. We were just talking, shop. And here you are.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you, and
Thank you, Charlie.
you got your spotlight, and we can't take no questions, so just join me in giving her a round.
Thank you.
Thank you all who joined, and that's the big bang. We enjoyed you all.
Are we off camera now?
Cut. The room records, so they'll.
Who's in the room? I just want to know. Might not be able to take questions, but I want to know who you are.
We can turn the cameras off. I mean, turn the recording off, right?
Yeah.